Welcome, everyone. Thank you for joining us today. We'll be waiting 2-3 minutes to let people roll in. You can start letting us know in the chat where you're joining us from and which organization you're representing. All right, we are so excited to get started today. I would like to introduce Kristen Abrams, who's going to launch our event today, our CEO and president. Welcome, Kristen.
Thank you, Loda, and good morning and welcome, everyone. My name is Kristen Abrams, and I'm the president and CEO of Commonwealth Corporation, whose vision is to create a world where meaningful employment can lead to the upward mobility for all. Today, we kick off our ReConvene series, a community-wide convening focused on reimagining workforce development in Massachusetts. This series will showcase and celebrate the power of private sectors, nonprofit, government, and education to transform the future of work for all within the Commonwealth. And we are delighted to have today's featured speaker, Joseph Fuller, Professor of Management Practice at Harvard Business School, joining us today. We are living through unprecedented times as multiple forces of change, COVID, demographic, technology, automation, globalization, are all coming together at an unprecedented pace and scale. Pandemic has exacerbated the inequalities in our workforce. The recession was particularly difficult in our Black and Latino populations, with a peak 12-month moving average unemployment for Latinos was at 17.5%, for Blacks it was 14.5%, and for whites it was 9%. Couple that with the fact that there are over 245,000 jobs available now, more than pre-pandemic. However, we estimate that there's over 300,000 that we would consider long-term unemployed. We need to close the gaps created by systemic inequalities. And to be successful, we will need to break through old paradigms. We will need to think differently, and we will need to work together differently. And that really is the focus of the future of work. The recently released Future of Work report offers these key insights for the path forward. First, the importance of taking an equity lens to how we think about our workforce development efforts, as existing inequities in the workforce will continue. Secondly, the report further validates the importance of investing in training programs which match the unemployed to critical growth industries in healthcare, advanced manufacturing, information technology, and the trade. We must think differently about how we prepare our future workforce. And we must act with a sense of urgency, upskilling the needs of unemployed entry-level workers who have been the most impacted by COVID. To do this, the governor has proposed investing $240 million in proven existing models to provide retraining pathways for over 52,000 unemployed and underemployed workers over the next 3 years in those priority occupations. The Future of Work also estimates that between 30 to 40,000 workers per year will need to be upskilled to respond to the shift in job availability over the next 10 years. Think about that. That's over 300 to 400,000 workers that will be impacted. And it is with this knowledge of the importance of investing in upskill and reskilling that we kick off today's series, focusing in on our Express program. We have personally met with over 90 community and organizational leaders to not only build awareness about Commonwealth Corporation, but more importantly, to understand their needs, their unique needs, the boundaries, and that have impacted their access. And we have used this feedback along with follow-up surveys to redesign this program, which the results have been incredible, with over a 300% increase in fund awards since these changes have been made. But this is just a start. It's taken an equity lens throughout all aspects of our organization, internally and externally, is the focus of our newly developed strategic plan. We will continue to challenge ourselves and our partners to do better in service of the historically underserved populations that we both serve. It is now my pleasure to introduce our Outreach Manager for the Workforce Training Fund, Kristen Rain. Kristen?
Thanks, Christine. Good morning, everyone. I'm Kristen Rain. I'm the Outreach Manager for the Workforce Training Fund. And I'm often the point of contact for our public partners like Mass Hire and the network of community colleges, and also industry partners like trade organizations, chambers of commerce, and businesses who just want to learn more about the Workforce Training Fund. So as you know, Commonwealth Corporation, our host today, administers several types of workforce development programs, and I'm here to share information on the Workforce Training Fund, specifically the newly relaunched Express program. So the purpose of the if we could just change this slide, please. I'm having trouble seeing the slides. Okay, so next slide, please. So the purpose of the Workforce Training Fund is to give Massachusetts employers the funding they need to train and upskill their workforce. It's a win for employees who are gaining new skills, often accompanied by wage increases or promotions. It's a win for employers who benefit from a better skilled workforce. And it's a win for the state as companies that complete training add jobs at a higher rate than the state average. The Workforce Training Fund is paid for by Massachusetts businesses through a small charge on their unemployment insurance. Essentially, it's a payroll tax. And Commonwealth Corporation, our hosts today, administer the fund on behalf of the Executive Office of Labor and Workforce Development. Slide 3, Express program. So the Express program is one of 2 grants available through the Workforce Training Fund, and it offers employers fast, simple access to a wide variety of training courses in order to help businesses respond to their emerging needs. And it's proven especially helpful to small businesses who might not otherwise be able to afford professional development and training. So as we've been considering ways to engage more small businesses, including minority-owned and women-owned enterprises during these critical times, we leveraged our networks to get their input and understand the barriers businesses were facing. And the survey was very insightful. We were happy to receive over 200 responses, including past grantees, but also those that have never applied for or received a Workforce Training Fund grant. So when we asked respondents, what do small businesses want the most from the Workforce Training Fund? They told us first and foremost, they want a clear and simple grant process, a wide variety of reimbursable courses, and flexibility to add new trainings as needs evolve. We also learned that small businesses plan to invest more in training this year versus 2020, averaging around $10,000 a company, a 30% increase. And we've actually seen that reflected in the numbers is even greater than that. And finally, all small businesses surveyed said they would invest more in training this year if it were fully reimbursed. Slide 4. Change happens, Express helps. On July 1st, we relaunched the Express program using the tagline, Change happens, Express helps. It's fast. A business can go from application to training in just 21 days. It's flexible. A business can choose from hundreds of courses in a searchable directory with new courses added all the time. And it's friendly. There's a dedicated team at Commonwealth Corporation that will support you and respond to any questions that may arise. Slide 5. The directory. So the directory. So this is this is the change I'm most excited about because it allows businesses to search for keyword, training provider, course description. And this dynamic directory includes several hundred pre-registered courses that any employer can choose from when they apply. There are new courses added all the time. And part of the flexibility piece is that if you or your employees find a course somewhere that they're interested in, that training provider can add their course to our directory. We've also waived the requirement that trainers had to already be teaching a particular course in order to be included in the directory. We found that this means brand new courses that didn't exist before can now be added in order to meet these emerging demands. Slide 6. So who is eligible? All Massachusetts employers who contribute to the fund are eligible to apply. So if you're a for-profit business, you're automatically contributing to the Workforce Training Fund through your unemployment insurance and therefore can train all your W-2 or full-time and part-time employees. Nonprofits are a little bit different. They may or may not be eligible depending on whether or not they pay into unemployment insurance. And state, federal, and municipal entities are exempt from applying for a grant. So a business can apply for multiple grants as needs arise, just not to exceed a $30,000 reimbursement in a given year. And the funds will pay up to $3,000 per person per course. So one of the biggest changes that we made to the program is that training is now a full reimbursement for small businesses with 100 or fewer employees in Massachusetts, and a 50% reimbursement for larger businesses with 100 or one or more employees. Slide 7. So Express was trending upwards even before these changes were announced. And in Q1 this year, the number of Express applications was up 41%, and the amount requested was up 51%. So we're seeing businesses return to more training, and we expect this trend to continue, especially with this program redesign. The most in-demand topics we've seen include supervisory skills training. That includes things like the role of the frontline the role of the frontline leader, supervisor training, and a 40-hour management certificate course. Also, non-technical professional skills, including things in personal productivity, for example, time management, software training, like intro to WordPress, Excel, social media marketing, and team collaboration platforms like Zoom. And professional industry-specific training. That includes things like human resources. You can use the Express program to get your SHRM certification, blueprint reading, CNC machining, understanding the tax code, etc. So that just gives you a small sampling of the wide variety of courses available through Express. Slide 8. So what are the next steps? So the Express page on the workforcetrainingfund.org website includes a user-friendly graphic that walks you through the steps. Essentially, you pick a course from the directory, you gather your materials. Most importantly is the certificate of good standing from the Department of Revenue, which you need for any state grant program. That shows you're up to date on your financial obligations to the state. You need a certificate of good standing. You apply for funding and you enroll in the course with the training provider. Then you accept and sign off on the award from the Workforce Training Fund. Your employees complete the training and you request reimbursement, and you'll receive a reimbursement either for 50% of the cost of training or 100% of the cost of training within just a couple of weeks. Slide 9. So as I mentioned, I'm often the point of contact for businesses seeking training, industry association groups, really anything that you need to learn more about the Workforce Training Fund, please reach out. Rain at comcorp.org. That's KRAYNE at comcorp.org. And you can also find full details on all our programs, including the Express, which we just reviewed quickly, and the general program, which is the larger, more customized training program that can last up to 2 years and awards up to $250,000 to businesses. Thanks very much. I'll turn it back to you.
Thank you, Kristen. Hello, everybody. Thank you so much for joining today. My name is Yi Yang, Research and Policy Director at the Commonwealth Corporation. And it is my pleasure today to introduce our keynote speaker, Professor Joseph Fuller, Professor of Management Practice at the Harvard Business School. When it comes to understanding the challenges and opportunities in upskilling the workforce, I know no better expert than Professor Fuller. So very briefly, Professor Fuller leads the Managing the Future of Work initiative at HBS and the Project on Workforce across Harvard University initiative bring innovation and evidence to our understanding of the changing workforce. Professor Fuller currently teaches the Becoming a General Manager course in the second year of the MBA program. A 1981 graduate of the school, Professor Fuller was the founder and first employee of the global consulting firm Monitor Group, now Monitor Deloitte. During his 3 decades in consulting, Professor Fuller worked with senior executives, policymakers on a wide variety of issues related to corporate strategy and national competitiveness, particularly industries with a heavy reliance on technology, which is now central to the conversation around the future of work. Today, Professor Fuller will speak on his recent research on workforce development. I'm very excited and grateful for this sneak peek into the latest findings. And after the presentation today, we'll have time for question and answers with everybody. So now please join me in welcoming Professor Fuller. Turn it over to you.
Well, thank you for that kind introduction, Yi. It does make me feel a bit like the senior citizen I increasingly am, but I'm delighted to be here with you to talk about this very important topic of workforce development. And my belief is now that if you engage most employers in the United States or the UK or Germany or Canada about their biggest problem, the vast majority would say is I can't find people to hire with the skills I need. So we have an anomaly today in the United States of almost 11 million job postings with only 8.4 million unemployed. Many more jobs than there are even conceivable candidates. So over the last couple of years, I've tried to understand several things. One is why is that problem? Why does it exist? And why has it been getting worse ever since the recession in 2000? I'm dating myself, but the dot-com recession of 2000, with every subsequent recovery, the rate of marginalization of workers has gotten higher. Whereas prior to 2000, there was an equilibration. So we got back to historical norms about the ratio of open jobs with unemployed. So something's been happening in the last 20 years, which we wanted to understand. And that's led us to do several pieces of research. I'm going to show you just a little bit of data from something we published a couple of weeks ago called the Hidden Workers Project, which is available to you at the Managing the Future of Work website at Harvard Business School, or through Accenture, which was a co-author of the work, co-researcher with me on the work. I'm also going to share with you, and you'll be able to tell that it's hot off the presses because the slides are rather complicated. Some recent work I've done, just about to publish in probably November, of lower skilled, lower paid workers and what distinguishes the experience of those who get promoted and raise their income level versus those that don't, which I think are extremely important data for you to consider as you think about the power of programs like Express, which is exactly the type of initiative we need more of in the United States and in Massachusetts to help break some of the cycles that I'm going to describe to you. So I'm going to run through a few slides with you. So I mentioned this notion of hidden workers. And what a hidden worker is a worker that doesn't fall in the view of prospective employers. It's not someone who's hiding from work, trying to avoid, for example, applying for jobs when they go to a mass job center. It's someone who is screened off from consideration, never really gets the opportunity to increase the number of hours they're working or to get back in the workforce. That's a phenomenon I want to explain to you briefly. So we did research in the, I'm hoping this would go down, but it's not. So, yes.
Sorry, could you display settings and switch the view? Perfect, right there.
Thank you. Sorry about that. We went in search of data about who are people that are consistently marginalized from the workforce, to try to understand why is that the case. We did a survey in 3 countries, Germany, the United Kingdom, and the US, to understand who those people were. We surveyed both workers who had historically been on the margins of employment, previous hidden workers, but now are employed, and those who are still screened off. And what we found is among this population, which is roughly 27 million people in the United States, 42% of those people would qualify for high-skilled jobs as defined by the Department of Labor, Bureau of Labor Statistics, and 58% for middle skills job. You can see the education distribution on the right. So this is not strictly a high school dropout or some college no degree population. You'll see that almost 50% have either some college no degree, a bachelor degree, or actually advanced degrees. Next slide, please.
Hi, Professor. Sorry, it seems like we're having some technical issues
Okay,
here. Would you be able to?
I'll take control then. Thanks.
Yes. Would you be able to take control and click the swap view
Will
again?
do. So here you can see the composition in the US as of March 2020 of hidden workers. 27 million of them in 3 big categories. The single biggest category at 63% are people who are working part-time but aspire to work full-time. That's largely driven by a couple of considerations. The first is that what the BLS calls economic reasons, which means either they don't dare put their current part-time employment at risk to go seek a better job, or the hours they work doesn't accommodate seeking a different job or accommodate getting qualified for a different job. There are also caregiving considerations, about 10%. Now, please remember when we start talking about 10% of 63% of 27 million people, you're talking about 2 million people. So it's a big number who are limited by caregiving responsibilities. Health is another consideration. And then there are non-economic reasons, could be anything from where they are geographically relative to work to other considerations, perhaps a criminal conviction. The second largest category are people who are missing from the workforce. Those are people who are inactive for some reason. And a significant number of these almost 10 million people, almost 60%, do want to work. 12% are retired, but in retirement may be open to work if under the right conditions, and other people are inactive. And the smallest, this is a function of the way the US government gathers data, is the long-term unemployed who are missing from work altogether. So this is a very, very large population. And they are not active in a lot of job interviews because they've been screened off from the process of consideration. This is very important for that largest category of people who are missing hours, working part-time but aspire to work more hours, or those who want to work in that missing from the workforce category. How is it they end up being screened out of the process, particularly in a market where there are more job openings that are unemployed, and the single biggest strategic question for a lot of employers is, where can I find the workers to staff up my business to man it in the recovery? Well, the first consideration has to do with what's called an RMS system, the resource management system, and specifically the ATS or applicant tracking system elements by which companies assess candidates. RMS systems rely on artificial intelligence at the front end of the process to screen candidates. And the objective of an ATS system is to take the very large number of candidates and winnow it down to a small number of people who are viewed as highly qualified, given the instructions that the ATS system has been programmed with for active consideration by human being. So a myth that many applicants, people seeking work, have in their head is some human being is going to read what I've responded to these questions and interpret it and exercise some judgment over what they're seeing. That does not describe reality. The reality is filters using word association and credential screens are looking at all those applicants, and on average for a large company, and by the way, 99% of large enterprises in the United States use this type of system, and 70% of all employers in the United States use this type of system. If for a large company job paying more than $50,000 a year, they will get roughly 250 applicants that don't abandon the process or are immediately eliminated. They will interview on average 5 people. So the number of resumes that actually pop out the other end to be looked at is very, very small. Now we surveyed employers to look at how they use these systems. And for middle skills candidates, these are the top 5 filters that are applied by US employers. Do they have the right credential? Do they have an employment gap in their resume? I'll come back to that in a second. Are they legal workers in the United States? And can they demonstrate it with some type of government issued identification? And do they have some type of referral from a current employee? You can see an equivalent list for high skills candidate. Immigration status pops to the top. That's another way of thinking about the H-1B visa problem, that there are a lot of jobs out there with high skill profiles where there's literally simply not enough Americans with the professional qualifications, which is the second variable, who can prove it. And then employment gap again, and criminal record. Now let's just think about a couple of these things through the lens of both why workers are hidden and what can we do to get them in the workforce. Let's focus for a second on that employment gap issue. So in both categories, a top 5 filter is, does someone have a gap in their employment of more than 6 months? Now, when you think about that through the lens of employer, it might make some sense to use a filter like that. And none of my research suggests these filters are purposefully being used in some type of Ebenezer Scrooge or Snidely Whiplash type of way to try to hurt people. Employers want to find qualified workers, but they want to do it very efficiently. So they look at someone with an employment gap, and what are they saying, particularly in an era when the technology associated with work is churning pretty quickly? Well, they could be saying, this person hasn't been in the workforce for a while. Their skills may be atrophying. And also notice variable 5 for middle skills candidates. This person hasn't been employed for a while. Doesn't seem like maybe they have a lot of other people they've worked with historically who are in a big hurry to help them find a new job. Maybe they're not a great coworker. Maybe they haven't been a great performer, or maybe they have some other problem that frankly, I don't want to hear about, but is inhibiting them getting a job. And all of that is inferential, but it does affect the job prospects of workers. Now, a 7-month period without work could be explained by someone who lost their job suddenly in an industry recession, so their job experience isn't very relevant to the employers that are still hiring. But it could also be someone who had a problem pregnancy and was not working out outside the home for an extended period to get that new member of their family settled in and arrange appropriate care arrangements. It could be a military spouse who's the other adult in their household was stationed at Camp Lejeune, North Carolina, and got transferred to 29 Palms, California, let alone Okinawa, and had to move a family, set up to seek for employment once the family was established, and therefore had a long gap. So the workers are hidden in part because companies, in their effort to be highly efficient in finding candidates, rely on credentials, often a famous one being, of course, a college degree required for jobs that haven't historically required it, and other proxies to judge the appropriateness of workers. And that tends to put workers on the margins, outside of consideration, even though, in fact, in many ways, they are highly qualified for the job. Now, you don't have to trust me to say that, because employers acknowledge it. Could you move to the next slide, please? Yes. So this looks for both middle skilled workers and high skilled workers. The question being, to employers, do you think your hiring system filters out candidates who would be a success in the job? And the numbers are pretty startling. For middle skilled workers, 94% of employers say the filtering does in fact eliminate qualified candidates some, most, or all the time. And you look at the top two shaded bars, you essentially have 70% of employers, or 65% of employers saying often or always are we eliminating qualified candidates by the way we look for people. And for higher skilled worker, the number only drops to 88%. So you have this perversity where employers say finding the right talent is hard for me, but I'm simultaneously eliminating potentially qualified candidates because I've set up this system up front in an effort to be highly efficient in finding people to work for me. But it has the inadvertent kind of collateral damage effect of actually disqualifying people that might be qualified for the job. It's a very hard thing to understand unless you accept the fact that the entire system is set up to be as efficient as possible to winnow down the number of candidates to just those few who absolutely fit the job description. Well, how appropriate is the job description? Next slide, please. So we talk to employers about how often they modify job description to reflect the current status of the job. And you can see here moving left to right. We go from someone who's on the far left who's just using the existing job description, not upgrading it regularly, to all the way to the far right when completely new job description is being built from scratch to reflect what we need. And what should jump out at you, of course, is that the higher skilled the job, the more likely the job description is to be updated. The teal color on the right hand bar of each set of four. Whereas for middle skills jobs, they're only updated, only 25% of them are regularly updated, 27%, and less than 10% are clean sheet of paper upgrade. Why is this important? Because the job description is the basis for the filtering. So if you don't update the job description, only slightly modify it, which very seldom, by the way, means eliminating previous requirements, the job description becomes more and more like a Christmas tree that just has new ornaments hung on it, but none of the old ornaments or lights or tinsel are taken off. That begins to inform filters that rather than seeking the 5 or 6 absolute fundamental skills someone has to have to be successful for a job and leaving it at that, to cause the job description to be 4 pages long, 5 pages long, 6 pages long, with lots of nice to have and slightly dated skills that are being used to try to distinguish between candidates with on create more and more irrelevant or passé bases. So once again, the entire system is geared to be efficient. Why are job descriptions not being rewritten, particularly for low paid jobs? Well, because it takes a lot of time. An expensive person has to spend time on it. They have to talk to the hiring manager. They have to talk to the operators. It's expensive to rewrite it. Let's just go with what we've got. Now I can see in the chat that people are asking about the slides. Everything I've covered so far is directly from the hidden workers white paper, which you can get on the Managing the Future of Work website at Harvard Business School. So if you just Google that, you will find this data. So for people on the fringes of the workforce, and remember, more than 60% of these people are currently employed in a part-time position. They are regularly being screened out of consideration for better jobs, which they want, through the active actions of employers who have maximized efficiency over talent sourcing impact, getting people who are actually qualified in roles. Now, let me take you into the domain of the employed, very consistent with the types of programs Commonwealth Court supports. And what happens to lower wage workers, those that got advanced versus those who haven't been advanced? Next slide, please. So the first thing you want to say is, do American workers actually care about getting advanced? Do they think they should be preparing for a future of work where job requirements are changing? And emphatically, the answer is yes. So 2/3 of American workers say, I'm responsible for my own future. I have agency in this. By the way, I did this analysis of 14 countries, and say what you want about America, but we're #1 in terms of owning it. And I would ask, if we were a live audience, what country do you think where workers have the lowest ratio owning it, and simultaneously say the government should take care of it for them? Just to confirm, some of the biases some may have in the back of your head, it's right, that country is France. So France is the country that's least likely to take self-efficacy seriously and put the government in charge, along with Japan. Next slide, please. So if they feel agency over this, why don't they do something about it? Why don't they go get the skills that correlate with what employers are looking for in those job descriptions, so that they can get qualified either to move from part-time to full-time or get back in the workforce? Well, business leaders say the reason they don't do it is they're afraid to make changes, 29%, but maybe they can't afford the cost, maybe they don't feel any urgency about it, or they don't have the time. So there's a blend here of an incorrect supposition that executives have that hidden workers don't really care or are scared, blended with, well, maybe they don't have the resources, time, don't know how to prepare. Next slide, please. Well, in fact, the real active consideration for workers who are aspire to prepare at a higher level is they don't have the money to finance at the cost. Learning would detract from their ability to work, which would reduce their incomes. They don't have time. They don't know what options they should be pursuing in order to qualify for a better job. And they have insufficient work support from their employers. Or they're worried that they're so far along in their current career that moving now might be too late for an older worker, things like that. So notice how the employers do kind of understand there are issues like cost and time and knowing what to study, but also, maybe they just don't care. Maybe they're scared to try to change, where in fact, there's a very clear-eyed, obvious set of problems here, many of which programs like those sponsored by Commonwealth can start to address, like the cost, like the effect on wages, like being directed to a program which the employer actually cares about. That learning would benefit them and the worker. Next slide, please. So this gets us to new research. The last set of slides, the middle set of slides I show is from a study also available on the website called Future Positive that I issued about 18 months ago, what we see in terms of employer actions, and I apologize for this being a rather complicated slide. What we see in terms of employer actions is that employers are insufficiently supporting actions that help workers advance and know how to advance. So many of you will be familiar with what's called a Net Promoter Score, which is the number of people that give you a positive grade minus the number of people who give you a negative grade. So if you look, for example, at Apple iPhones, they often have an 85, 90% Net Promoter Score, which means the number of people who, when they survey owners of Apple iPhones, 95% of people say they love it, 5% people say they don't like it. Net Promoter Score 95 minus 5 equaling 90. Here I've taken that concept and extended it to the relationship between lower paid workers making less than 200% of the poverty line, and how they judge the score they give employers on certain practices minus the employer's self-scoring. And here you can see a distribution. Each dot represents a specific type of action in different categories. So you can see at the very top, we have pre-employment, then we have the hiring process, and we have onboarding, benefits. And I want to come to three key categories here. The ones shifted left, where workers give the worst scores to employers so that the net is highly negative and highly correlated with negative outcomes for the worker. The first is in multiple dimensions, workers find that they don't get a lot of mentorship or supervisor support on the job that advances their prospects. That could be anything from honest feedback to kind of regular coaching on how you might behave in the workforce, or what attitude you might bring to your work, or what improvements you could make in your personal conduct. It could be a hard skill or a soft skill to be more efficient. Similarly, although the scores aren't quite as bad as mentorship and supervisor support, in terms of learning and development, employers score themselves much higher than employees score themselves. So do I know what I need to improve on? Is there a program to help me do that? Or have I been told what types of outside resources, or for larger companies, what resources are available, for example, in the corporate learning system that I might access to improve my performance such that I be a candidate for advancement? And in this gray field, how clear paths of advancement are. What are the jobs in the company I could aspire to? What do I need to be able to do? What do I need to be able to demonstrate so I get consideration for that? So if you take a step back and kind of imagine, think about your own workplace, or what you've heard from students, people you're trying to help find a job, what you've heard from member employers. What we're seeing here is that the ability of a worker to exercise that self-efficacy and get the skills and get the support to either move out of part-time employment to full-time employment, or get back in the workforce, often breaks down because they're just not getting institutional support. Now, the companies may have policies. We give quarterly feedback, and I believe if you talk to chief human resource officers or talent managers, they will pass a polygraph test that they are giving, they have a pathway for advancement, and they make it clear to people. They're offering learning opportunities. They're providing mentorship, but the workers don't recognize that. They don't see themselves as getting help. And that has the consequence of disabling them in multiple ways. So I'm just going to give you some additional snapshots here. Let's look at mentorship, where we've got the question of, does the employer have an active program to provide mentorship for low-skilled workers? Top left-hand side, the green bars are more positive. So 46% of employers say we always do that or we often do that. Well, that's funny because if you look at the employee bar at the bottom with the red scores, almost 50% are saying no one ever does that or they very rarely do it. If you look at our career pathways available, slightly more favorable distribution, but still only 20% of workers, the lower bar, are saying it's very clear to me how I move to the next level of pay, or often clear to me, whereas 44% of employers are giving them high scores for that. And 40% of employees are saying 25 plus 15 in the red and the orange. I never heard of a pathway, or I've rarely heard of a pathway. Same thing in learning and development. Next slide, please. So here you get this scatter diagram of that contrasts the experience of workers who have experienced upward mobility on the x-axis running horizontally versus those who haven't on the y-axis. And this is not a trick, slide. Yup. Everybody who got advanced had a significantly better experience along every step of the hiring, onboarding, development, and support cascade that we originally showed you. And it demonstrates better employment practices, directing people, giving them better feedback, pointing out what they need to do to enhance their prospects, giving them resources to do that, is directly correlated with getting a raise or getting a promotion. Next slide, please. And this just breaks some of that down to you. Now, all of this research is yet to be published. So if you visit our website periodically or sign up for our newsletter when you're there, we'll alert you when this research related to the experience of lower paid workers in terms of upward mobility is made public. And you can see this contrasts those who have upward mobility on the top of each of these distributions versus those who haven't. You can see that there are profound differences in terms of mentorship, access to pathways, and learning development, where people who have advanced are being supported in multiple ways at twice plus the rate of those who haven't. Next slide, please. As we said earlier, workers think that they're responsible for this, but the messages received from workers in terms of what they have to do to advance are sufficiently infrequent and unspecific, so they don't know what to do. Look at the 22 and 15% for workers saying we seldom or never get told what specifically I have to do to get advanced to the next pay level. Next slide, please. This also comes in the form of insufficient direct feedback. Question, do you have a supervisor or mentor who provides you regular performance reviews? The employer says, yep, we do that all the time. 60% up to 81% saying, we do that always, often, or sometimes, whereas workers only experience at half the rate 40% of the time. Next slide, please. So here you see the net result of this, that on the right-hand side, once again, with that using that NPS concept, the workers' positive NPS to negative on the horizontal axis, the employers' self-scoring on the vertical axis. You can see that employers regularly give themselves dramatically higher scores in areas like cultivating technical skills, coaching people on soft skills, providing benefits like transport and caregiving that will enable me to advance. That's that dotted circle in the upper left-hand side, where employers think they're doing well, but employees experience it poorly. And there are areas in which the employer doesn't really think it's nearly as important as the workers do, areas like having that role model or mentor, being directed toward areas of advancement in the company. So I'd like to now start getting ready to move on to our questions, but just a couple of things in summary. We all know that for aspiring workers coming out of school, getting on a pathway, whether it's through compensated work-based learning or dual enrollment or getting in programs in community college or a technical school or four-year program that have a fairly clear line of sight to gainful employment with a future. We know those challenges. We know how hard they are to overcome. We know of a lot of work to do. But there are 27 million Americans in this hidden category, the majority of whom are part-time workers who are anxious to get more hours and better pay, who are not getting in employment the type of direction and feedback and supervision that'll allow them to get on that pathway to more hours and better income, nor are they getting the training opportunities that will provide them that, even though they feel a lot of self-efficacy and know that they should take charge of their own lives because they have economic reasons. They can't risk the current hours. They have caregiving obligations. They've got physical or mental condition that impedes that. So when we can get interventions that cause the employer to take more ownership of these challenges and help people who've proven themselves to be productive workers, where you're making a judgment on the basis of a personnel file and known experience, not a resume that's been screened by AI. You can make investments that can advance your company's competitiveness and good outcomes for citizens. And whether you're a skills provider, an educator, an employer, or a representative of a group of employers, there are actions you can take to advance that agenda. So Yi, let me come back to you and see what questions we've got.
Thank you very much, Professor. Can I have my video back on, please? Great, thank you. Thank you, Professor. A lot of very fascinating information. And just right now, I know we're short on time, but I do encourage everyone to please write in your questions in the chat. I'll do my best to try to group them in the time we have. And just reading the questions we've already received, I think, Professor, on your last point about the gap in perception between what employers believe they're doing and how employees feel how employees perceive it. Mm-hmm. Do you see certain industries where the gap is wider than others among the employers?
Yep.
There?
It tends to be big in industries where the ratio of workers to supervisors are large. So in advanced manufacturing, often there are 30 workers for a supervisor. Whereas in financial services, it can often be as low as 5 to 1. So industries are not created equal in terms of prospects for advancement. This is another piece that will be in the piece of research I'll issue in November. And that has interesting implications, Xi, because it means if you're coming out of a community college and had an offer from a bank and an advanced manufacturing firm, one of your considerations should be that the way the math works, you're more likely to actually advance in the bank just through sheer algebra than you are on the advanced manufacturer. In fact, you might take a lower paying job in a bank because you'd have greater prospects in the near term of getting advanced. So it's very different. A big outlier is healthcare, because so much advancement requires specific credentials. So going to a healthcare provider that does not provide not just a line of sight to advancement, but direction into programs and support into getting those programs, many entry-level jobs in healthcare are not very good paying jobs, and there isn't a very clear line of sight to advancement because it requires credentialing or licensing, which is hard for a worker to obtain without substantial support from an employer.
Gotcha. So a quick follow-up on that. When we think about closing this perception gap, what can be done? What is something employers or employee can do today that you think would help ameliorate this problem?
Well, I think for employers, the first thing is to recognize that anytime you set up a fence in the terms of job requirements, there's someone right immediately on the other side of that fence. And for many employers, they fenced in a very small patch of ground. They need to be thinking about, how do I look more efficiently at a greater number of candidates? And specifically, how do I get off this hobby horse of minimizing the number of candidates I look at by raising as many restrictions and conditions and skills I'm looking for? Focus on the 4 or 5 things that relate to the performance of people who are currently in the job who are successes. How do I start looking for proxies, positive proxies, not negative proxies, like exclude anybody with a criminal conviction, or exclude anybody without a college degree, or exclude anybody with more than 6 months work gap on their resume? How do I look for the 5 or 6 things that correlate with success? For the job seeker, it's first of all, remember you're dealing with a machine, talk to it like a machine. Use exactly the words it asks about. Look at people who are in the job now. If you can look, for example, at a LinkedIn or some other source, to see what are the skills they have that they make prominent mention of that you don't have. Can I find a way to earn that credential? Maybe through an online course, maybe through something at a community college or an extension school. But the number one thing to understand is machines don't make inferral leaps. They are looking for the phrase Microsoft Office, and if you put in Microsoft PowerPoint, it doesn't give you any credit. They're looking for sales experience. Don't say you're a customer service rep if that was a sales job just because that's what your old employer called it. Say you were a salesperson.
Gotcha. Okay, we have time for one more question. This is coming from the audience. We have a question asking, are nonprofits included in your research, Professor? And what can you say about extending what the findings you've shown today to other sectors, including nonprofits?
They were not. And I think that nonprofits there's no data that suggests they don't suffer from many of these problems. Many nonprofits, the distribution of nonprofits is that there are many small nonprofits, and the smaller an enterprise is or institution is, the less likely it is to rely on technology. So there may be more conventional hiring. Not-for-profits, like a lot of small enterprises, also very often hire on the basis of informal networks. You're looking to hire someone, I'm a colleague of yours, I hear we're looking to hire, I come to you and say, I have a classmate, I have a cousin, I've got a neighbor, I've got someone I used to work with. You say I'd love to meet them at a Bank of America or a Fidelity or a tech company. That's all going to be done initially on online systems and handled by AI.
Great, thank you, Professor. This concludes our event today. Before we wrap up, just want to quickly thank everyone for listening and for your participation. Also want to direct your attention to our next event on October 12th at 1 p.m. It's called Increasing the Marketability of Small Diverse Businesses. So please be on the lookout for event invitations and mark your calendars, please, for October 12th. Thank you very much, everyone.